Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our December partner webinar with JP Morgan Workplace Solutions. My name is Lisa Friedlander. I'm the CRO over at Next and My Next Raise, and we are incredibly honored and excited to bring to you such an important topic for today's webinar. I mean, cap table management is critical to any startup success. So today we're going to be talking about what are the best practices. The cap table is the DNA of your company and contains everything that a potential investor needs to know about your company ownership. And the more your company grows, the more complicated it becomes. Many of you know exactly what I am talking about. So in terms of being investor readiness, our goals here at My Next Raise is to have our community be investor ready. Cap table solution and management is a cornerstone to that. So I'm really grateful to have JP Morgan Workplace Solutions, our partners here today, bringing you this important information. Alan Gould and Vanessa Blanco. Alan is VP at JP Morgan. He helps lead the business development and strategy for the cap table team. Before joining JP Morgan, he was with Global Shares, which was acquired by JP Morgan in August of 2022. He has 5 years of experience working directly with companies and their cap tables. And Vanessa Blanco is an executive director at JP Morgan, currently serving as the head of cap table sales within the asset wealth management division. Vanessa leads an international sales team across 3 countries, specializing in early stage tech founders. Guys, we couldn't have a better team with a better solution here to talk about cap table management. So with that, I will turn it over to Vanessa to get started. Please feel free to put questions in the chat. Please feel free to raise your hand. We're a small group. We love to be informal. Both Alan and Vanessa agree. We'd love to have the conversation going. So feel free to raise your hand to interrupt with any questions, and we'll also reserve some time at the end. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Vanessa to kick us off.
Lisa, thank you so much, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may reside. We are so honored. My team, Alan and Rena here, are so happy to be here, really discussing a pretty dry and tough conversation. We have the privilege of delivering the message around cap table. And when we first started, I was like, how are we going to make this somewhat stale conversation fun and interactive? And the truth is that cap table management, unless you are a CFO or former founder, it can be convoluted, it can be boring, and it can be super confusing. So our only mission today is really to open it up. Let's really have some free-flowing conversations. There is no question that is too big or too small. Our only mission today is really to help educate you as a founder, no matter where you are in your journey. Here at JP Morgan, been around for almost 17 years in January, and our mission is to really help educate you and prepare you for whatever next step of your business may be. JP Morgan is one of the few banks that you cannot outgrow, and we realize that as a startup founder, no matter where you are in your journey, the more help and understanding that you get earlier on, the probability of you being able to grow and excel your company is probably more favorable. So myself, Rena, and Alan are really all here for you. Please don't be shy on the questions. What we hope to do is really educate you and have you walk away with, you know what? I didn't know that part. And whether it's talking to counsels, investors, potential new employees, the idea for today is to hopefully bring some added knowledge that you probably didn't think about before. I will share another piece. Here at JP Morgan, not only is our mission to help educate you, but really provide you with the tools necessary. We do provide you with a complimentary cap table, whether you use our solution or another one. We just hope that you walk away with today understanding your cap table a little better, understanding what you need to know or what you don't need to know. And then as you continue to talk to counsel is, what should I be bringing up during the stages of my journey? We also have a complimentary banking piece, another arm to our offering, specifically around the startup community. So if you're interested in learning more, Lisa has put in a link on the chat. Please feel free to reach out to us. We are here to assist you. So with that being said, Alan, handing it over to you in LA.
Thanks, Vanessa. Appreciate it. And thanks, Lisa, for setting everything up, and appreciate everyone's time today. So really just to echo a lot of what Vanessa has mentioned there, I suppose we're here really to help you around cap table management, to help you around, I suppose, the whole fundraising process that you're probably looking at right now. And I suppose specifically we look at cap table, and I'll go through some of the best practices around that today. But no such thing as a silly question. Definitely jump in and ask questions, whether it's raising your hand or popping it into the chat. We're absolutely here to answer and give you the best that we can. And I think for today, really, it's about, I suppose, demystifying some of the terminology, but also just taking away some of the terms that will benefit you in conversations either this week, next week, or going forward. So we're really just trying to give you the tools and the knowledge that will make it easier for you in the fundraising process, but also as you scale and grow your business. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just go through a couple of slides and then go through some of the best practices. Cool. So hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yep, you're good to go, Alan.
Good to go.
Thank you.
Perfect. So just to kick off and just a bit more background, as Vanessa had mentioned, so we're actually a group in JP Morgan called Workplace Solutions. We're designed to work with early stage venture-backed high growth startups for the most part. We'll focus on cap table today. We have a bunch of other solutions around financial wellness, wealth management, et cetera, as you grow. So you effectively can't outgrow us as you go through your journey. Again, same idea here. We can take you from seed through to IPO. What we'll focus on today, like we mentioned, is the cap table management side of things. So it's our solution to help you manage your equity, to manage your ownership as you grow, as you bring in more employees, as you bring in more investors and raise more capital. We want to make sure you're tracking all of this accurately and set up for success. We'll go through that in a bit more detail towards the end. A big part of what we look to do alongside these types of workshops is support you on the software side of things. So we have a dedicated team that will do all of the onboarding for you, to take you through that full process and make sure that all your data is accurate and up to date. That looks like this. Basically, it's a very detailed process where we'll do all the reconciliation for you, we'll capture all your history, etc. What we really want to focus on today are these four main pillars. So I suppose we've been doing this for quite a while. We were actually a fintech business that JP Morgan acquired a couple of years ago called Global Shares. That is now Workplace Solutions. But I suppose we've been through a similar journey to yourselves from start to finish of building an MVP, going to market, scaling up, and then ultimately being acquired. And employee ownership was a massive part of that journey. And naturally, the cap table then is a huge part of that journey, as well as there is investors, there's different owners, and then the employee stock options have a knock-on effect to the cap table. So these are things, I suppose, that we come across day in, day out. They're anecdotes, they're best practices, they're pieces of information that hopefully you'll be able to take away from today and start to think about this in a bit more detail and start to think about it both tactically and strategically. Because I suppose a lot of this stuff, it mightn't be massively complicated right now, but it's something when you do raise your first big round of financing, when you start to think about bringing in the first batch of hires that you need to issue stock options to, and then ultimately strategically thinking about your exit. If you're going to take on venture capital, there's naturally going to be an exit as part of that journey. So really just starting to get you to think about what that will look like in the future. So the first of those four key pillars and best practices are know your cap table. So sounds super straightforward, sounds super simple, but it's something that we'll always encourage founders and early stage teams just to get this agreed and documented from the very early days. We hear all sorts of different stories. I think a common one that we will hear is you have three folks that maybe start a business. They're all excited. They're hyped up about the idea. They've maybe left their previous role and gone and jumped straight into the startup world. 6 months in, maybe one of the founders says, hey, maybe this isn't for me. I preferred my old role in my tech company, and it was a straightforward salary and it was just a different life. So they had gone away. They, in theory, have owned 33%, but it's not documented, it's not written down. There was a handshake agreement. So things like that are super important to get documented from day one, but also think about how you're splitting the equity. I think that's a really important thing from when you incorporate the business and you start to split equity between your founders. Maybe there's one founder that had started a lot more, and then there's two that have come in at a little bit of a later stage. So thinking about it and just being strategic and thoughtful around how you're splitting the equity between your founders. And again, back to the point of documenting, making sure this is all on paper, it's all documented and clear and concise, and everyone kind of knows where they stand. Again, this is going to have a knock-on effect to your fundraising. And as we touch on the next point, investors are going to want to see, okay, if there's three folks on the cap table today, they want to see those three folks are actively involved in the building of the business and the day-to-day of the business. If one of them have maybe left and gone off and gone to another role, but still owns 33%, it can make that conversation a little bit trickier.
Hey,
The
Alan.
second piece,
Oop.
go for it.
So sorry. So a question for you. So Rena and I started up a business. Are we too small to set up a cap table?
No, I would say not. I mean, I think that's kind of part of documenting who owns your business and starting to digitize the whole stack and your process. Once you've incorporated the business, that's the kind of time that we will say, yes, it's a good time to get your cap table digitized. And especially if you're starting to think about fundraising, kind of to the next pillar around how the cap table will impact your fundraising process. You really would just want to get this digitized from the start. And again, I suppose we'll always say to founders, look, it's going to be pretty straightforward at the start. There's not going to be a huge amount of hand holding or management with it when it's just yourself and your co-founder. Then you bring in 10 angels that have different maybe safe notes or different types of investment terms. And then it starts to become complicated and harder to manage. So we would always say just digitize it as early as possible. There's lots of resources out there. We're a free platform. There's lots of other platforms. So we'll always just say digitize it from the early days.
And what about, so my first round is friends and family. Do I really need a cap table at that moment?
We would say yes. I mean, again, these are all signals. Like everything at the early days when you're talking to investors is signal based. Like they want to see, okay, is this the type of founder and team that I want to invest in, that I know are going to be able to pivot, they're going to be able to be agile, they're going to be able to have everything organized and have their ducks in a row effectively. So this is just kind of another one of those tick the boxes where it ultimately becomes part of maybe a data room, as if you're sharing information with investors. So having your cap table, knowing who owns your business from the early days is super crucial. It'll probably sit alongside things like your operating agreements, your financial model, your hiring contracts, etc. So super important, I think, in terms of a signal to investors that you know exactly who owns the business and also what it would look like if you did take on capital. We'll touch on that when we look at the product a little bit later, but thinking about the scenarios, if you bring in that even that early friends and family or angel round, what it looks like. And it's not going to change the cap table directly if you're using safe notes, because you're not going to dilute yourself. Again, we'll go into that in a bit more detail. But ultimately, if those safe notes or convertible loan notes convert, they are going to turn into equity, which is going to dilute your cap table. And that's then where the complexity comes in. So it's all signals based, I think, at the early days. Having everything set up, ready to go is going to send a positive signal to an investor versus having the opposite conversation where they're having to ask you all these questions about who owns your business, have you digitized your cap table, etc., etc. And it goes for lots of other parts of that kind of data room or the information that you'll be sharing early on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course. So cool. On to the next piece. So how your cap table impacts your fundraising process. And we've probably touched on a decent chunk of it there. But I think the biggest piece here is your dilution. Like that's a huge thing for you as a founder to start to think about if you're planning to raise external capital from institutional investors. So from a venture capital fund, early on from angels, you're probably starting to think, okay, I need X amount of capital to get myself through 18 or 24 months. That's typically what the fundraiser will look like from very early doors. How much money do I need to get 18 months of runway or 24 months of runway, depending on what type of business you are. And ultimately, if you're taking on venture capital, you're going to have to start thinking about dilution and how that impacts both your own and your co-founders' ownership. But I think really the way to think about this is you probably make the decision early on, like, do I want to own 10% of $1 billion business, or do I want to own 100% of a $10 million business? Like they're two very different journeys, and that's just the choice that you will make early on. And again, it depends on the type of business. Does it need this much capital, et cetera, et cetera? But thinking about how that cap table will ultimately affect your fundraising process goes back to knowing who owns it. And it goes back also to signals to investors. Like those same investors are going to be looking at your cap table saying, is there space for us? Does this make sense for our own investment thesis? They're also going to be diluted as you raise further rounds of capital. So they're thinking about it from their own investment thesis and portfolio construction. So I think it's a really useful exercise to maybe even just do from further research in terms of how venture investors think about it, how investors in general think about cap table from their point of view. And then you can almost reverse engineer it to understand what the impact on the cap table will look like. But also from your own perspective, I think back to the dilution piece, you want to be motivated, you want to be incentivized to keep building the business and also have access to that upside. Like we mentioned, you want to probably own a smaller piece of a very big business rather than owning 100% of a smaller business. And that kind of goes back again to your choice of what kind of journey you're going on. But you want to make sure that you'll have access to that upside when there is a liquidity event or there's an exit at some stage. The third one, and this isn't always, I suppose, super obvious when we mention stock options, that it has such a clear knock on to the cap table and how it's managed. I suppose for us, this is what our team has been doing for many years. Lots of folks would have had ownership in the original global shares business where JP Morgan owned us. It was a big part of how folks were incentivized and motivated and felt like they were part of building something, and really kind of owning each individual part of that build. So using stock options, we'll always say, look, at the end of the day, your stock options, when you're an early stage business, are your biggest asset. Like they're a huge part in attracting and retaining top talent. You're going and trying to maybe bring top talent from other tech companies, from finance companies, whatever industry or area that you're trying to recruit top talent, but it's a huge part of you building the business and building a great team and culture, and issuing stock options is a huge part of that. So naturally, as an early stage company, you're probably not going to have the cash to be able to match what market compensation would be. So there's going to be some bit of a haircut on the cash compensation, but you can significantly make up for that in the stock options and the potential upside that those individual new hires and employees and early hires will get access to. And I suppose it's a huge part of them balancing, saying, okay, I'm taking some risk joining an early stage company, but I have stock options that could be seriously significant at a future point in time. The thing here on the cap table is you have to start to think about how it impacts the cap table. So probably two main things. So the first piece is having a stock option pool in place, so a stock option plan pool. This is the maybe 10-15% of your cap table that you reserve and have shares in to be able to issue out to those employees that have stock options. And also think about those employees exercising those stock options at some point in time. So they'll typically have some type of vesting schedule in place. So this means they effectively ride out time and receive portions of their stock options. So they vest into their stock options over time. And then they have the option to exercise them. So they ultimately have the option to buy those stock options, become a shareholder, and then ultimately be on the cap table. So that again has a knock-on effect to the cap table. There's going to be some dilution, but it's a huge impact for your employees. And again, in having them feel really a part of the business and really be an owner in the business. The last piece I'll touch on, and this one is more, go Vanessa.
So I have a couple of questions because you just said a lot. So thank you for that. But here I am, first time doing this, and I'm just totally confused. So you mentioned a pool. What is a pool? You mentioned well, with reference to pools, how do we even get started on that? Who do I even call?
Yeah, absolutely. So your pool is going to be your stock option pool of shares. They're literally just an allocation of shares that you're going to set aside to be able to issue out to your employees. So this is typically done with your legal counsel. So Lisa and team are a great resource in terms of speaking to the kind of legalities and the rules and the policies that will govern how that pool is put in place. And then we can help you with how we're actually tracking the pool going forward and making sure it's all put in place correctly and issued out correctly. But ultimately what it is that allocation of shares that are set aside to be able to issue as stock options to your employees. The typical allocation is maybe, it can be anywhere between 5% and 20%. Typically, we typically hear of 10%. The usual case is that, say you will raise a seed round, you have a lead investor, that lead investor will say, okay, now post this investment round, we want you to put a 10% option pool in place to issue out to that new talent, that new group of hires that you're going to bring in. And ultimately you're raising the capital, and part of that capital is going to be allocated to the hiring process. It goes to salary, it goes to recruiting, it goes to getting software set up, et cetera, et cetera. But having that planned pool in place and having it very clear and clearly documented, clearly set up is a super important part of the journey. Cool. And then the very last piece we'll go touch on is, this is more of a strategic piece. It's not something that probably is going to affect you right now, but what you do right now will have a knock-on effect to this piece. And this is planning for an exit. And it kind of goes back to one of our original points is if you plan to raise venture capital, an exit is a natural part of that. Again, it goes to the point we made earlier in terms of thinking about this from the investor's point of view. Like they've raised capital from limited partners who are their investors in their fund. They need to return that capital to those investors and hopefully plus some at some stage over time. So the exit is a super important part for both the investor, but also yourselves. So strategically thinking about what it would potentially look like, when it could potentially occur, but having everything documented is a huge part. And then back to Vanessa's probably like opening point of like, this right now probably doesn't seem like the coolest or the most exciting or important thing, but it's something that can have a massive knock-on effect, either negative or positive, if you do go ahead, have an exit at some stage in time. So having all of this transaction history documented, your cap table documented and up to date, kept up to date at each financing round, each significant event, and having all those documents in one centralized, secure place that you know you can refer back to super easily is something that's going to save you both time and money, maybe on legal fees, on different escrow potential fees that would happen at an exit. So just having everything secure, having all of your ducks in a row and knowing where all that information is at any given point in time, it's going to have a massive knock on to your exit when that hopefully comes at some stage in time. The very last bonus pieces, and we kind of touched on this already, is digitize this. Like we see so many early stage companies using spreadsheets to track all of this information. I've come from a venture fund prior to being with Global Shares, and we actually would have had all our cap tables in spreadsheets. It's 7 or 8 years ago at this stage, but in this day and age, there's so much resource out there available to you. There's ourselves, there's lots of other platforms creating resources and tools for early stage companies like yourselves. So something like cap table, there's too much risk to keep it on a spreadsheet. We all know how spreadsheets can be corrupted. Different folks have different versions. So making sure that you digitize it, get it into a good solid single source of truth that you can access easily is a super important part of the process as well. So they're the 4/5 key best practices, I suppose, that we come across every day. I know there's a lot in it. There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of financial kind of abbreviations and acronyms. So like we said at the start, definitely welcome questions. Absolutely anything goes. So ask us whatever you like, and we'll answer it as best as we can. But appreciate your time, and hopefully you'll take away some nuggets of information.
So maybe I'll start because they seem like we have a shy team today, but we are all friends, and truly our partnership with My Next Raise is really to bring education. We realize that being a founder is much harder than many believe, and the truth is that sometimes you can get lost on Google. So our mission is to be intentional, to provide education that is worthwhile. Let me bring a real life experience to light, and hopefully that will generate some questions. So been around here at JPM for about 17 years, and probably about 6 months ago, I was talking to a private banker, and he goes, Vanessa, I'm going to ask a silly question, like, how does the cap table actually work? And he goes, and we started having a conversation. He goes, oh, I get it. He goes, I just had one of my clients just recently have an exit of $400 million. He sold his company for $400 million. And automatically I smiled, and he gave me one of these faces, and he goes, yeah, but guess what his take home was, Vanessa? And I said, oh God, well, what was it? He goes, he sold his company for $400 million, and his takeaway was $4 million. And the reason why is because he gave up too much of the company too fast, and he didn't know exactly how much he had diluted his company. And so our mission is really to make sure that you understand how much you're giving away. We're not here to give legal advice, but we are here to share with you the components of what you actually need to set yourself up for success. And this is one thing that I tell all founders is, prior to even raising money, make sure you understand how much you actually want to give away. Make sure you understand how much you actually want to negotiate. Not every dollar is created equal. We've also spoke to founders who say, super excited, I waited 6 months to get an interview with XVC. And when we had the interview, they loved our product, but there wasn't enough ownership in the pie for them to come in. So they weren't interested anymore. So not to scare you, but really just to bring real life examples to hopefully help avoid those. But please, 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 any questions, we're here for you, Patty, Marco, Faraz, Donna, and anyone else on here, any questions that we may be able to answer.
Is there a chance that you can walk through sort of the tool that you provide for the My Next Raise platform in any way, or show some screen shares there?
Yeah. Do you mean specifically for the cap table offer?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. If you give us 1 second, we'll go ahead and share screen. And then, Patty, is there anything specifically that you would be looking for? Or are you just trying to see how easy it is to kind of navigate?
Mostly seeing how easy it is to navigate. I want to get a feel for the platform. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Absolutely, Patty. So hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
We'll walk through this super quick. Happy to do a one-to-one post this call and go through a little bit more detail and kind of join it back to your own specific cases. Effectively, what we'll do platform-wise is solve 3 main problems for you. So the first piece, and we've touched on it kind of throughout those best practices, is digitizing the ownership. So just creating a digital version of what your cap table look like. Maybe you're managing it in a spreadsheet right now. Fundamentally, the reason why these platforms exist, both ourselves and other providers, is to create a single source of truth. Like the biggest risk using a spreadsheet is, yes, it could be corrupted, but different folks as you go through the journey potentially would have different versions. So say you and your co-founders, most likely you share all the same version if you're using a spreadsheet. But if you've raised from angels, you start, especially if you start to raise from institutional investors who need to do reporting, they're much stricter in terms of, I suppose, their own regulation and what they need to comply with. They potentially would have different versions. So you want to create a single source of truth. That's really the kind of first principle is thinking of digitizing the cap table. In our platform, we'll show you the stakeholder view and we'll also show you a share class view. So again, this is something to be pretty mindful of as you go through rounds where common stock is going to be typically issued to you as a founder. So it could be called founder shares. It's usually common stock. There's different scenarios where there might be different types of terms attached to it. Again, I think Lisa and team will be really well placed to discuss that with you. Preferred shares will come in when there's investors typically. So investors will typically have, and it kind of is what it says in the tin, preference shares. So it means they have preference when there is some type of liquidity or an exit. Then we're tracking all the detail for you down below. So you have all your individual line items. These are founders, investors, your board members, your employees who exercise their options over time. Another nice piece here is that we have the count of stakeholders. So that's pretty relevant to our pricing. So once that says 100 or less, there's 0 software charge. So it's a completely free platform. The second piece that we would solve for you is the fundraising. So we'd allow you to run scenario analysis. And the main thing here is to our point of dilution. So this will allow you to map out and kind of start to see around the corners what your ownership would look like if you raise 3 million, if you raise 4 million, whatever the rounds might look like. And you can plug in a bunch of variables here. So in this scenario, I've just said, okay, what happens if I raise 3 million? I know my pre-money valuation is 12 million. This is the option pool that we spoke about. So these are the shares that we want to allocate. And I want a 10% option pool in place post the investment round. I think that's a key piece to think about as well, that it's typically done on a post-money basis. It is possible for it to be done on a pre-money basis. It's unlikely to be done. Typically, it's done on a post-money basis where the existing stakeholders get diluted versus the new shareholders that are coming in and writing new checks. You can write in who's writing the check. Again, this is super flexible. And then this is something that's going to be useful for you over time as well if you have safe notes. So it's safe is a simple agreement for future equity. The typical, I suppose, instrument used for early stage companies to raise capital quite efficiently. It's legally efficient, etc. Again, Lisa and team are really well placed to have a chat with you about those particular terms and what they might look like. We would allow you to model out and see what they would look like if they ultimately convert. So that's the big piece where they're not equity when you raise with them, so they don't dilute your business straight away, but they will convert into equity at a particular point in time if certain events or criteria are matched. And we'll take all of that into account in the background. And then really easy, you just run that scenario. So it's going to give you a post-money cap table. Again, it gives you some high-level info, so you'll get to grips with terms like your post-money valuation. So that's going to be simple addition of the pre-money valuation plus the total investment round. You'll see how much equity you're giving away. And then all of the detail will show you below. So you'll see all the pre versus post-money detail. again, for you as a founder, you want to be able to see dilution. You can see your percentage of dilution. You'll see the new checks that are written, so what percent those investors will own. We now have topped that option pool back up to 10%. So that's in a scenario where you already have an option pool in place. You've issued some stock options to new employees. It's been diluted down, but you want to raise another round and re-up the option pool so you have a fresh option pool to issue to the new hires. The last piece that's super important here and to be aware of is what's typically termed as safe stacking. So we'll see lots of companies that will raise early rounds of financing, and they could have 10, 15, 20 individual safe notes. And they seem great at the time, and they're a very, very efficient way. They're a very popular way of raising early stage capital, but ultimately they're going to convert into equity at some point in time and potentially take quite a chunk of your business when they do convert. So something to be aware of is the stacking of those safe notes. So I just have 2 in this scenario, and they've taken 8%, which is pretty okay. But again, just to be aware of, and a great tool for you to be able to run those scenarios and analysis. The last piece that we would solve for is the actual plan management. And I suppose for us, we've been through it ourselves. It's kind of our bread and butter over the last number of years, is the actual stock option plans. So the way we view it, I suppose, is yes, there's complexity in the cap table. It could be a bit of a headache to manage. The stock options really are the things that if they get out of control and you lose documentation, or you lose kind of the run of the vesting schedules, etc., they're really more where the administrative burden will come in. So they're much more complicated to manage. So we try to make it as easy as possible for you by digitizing and automating the workflows. Think about if you get to a stage where you've 20, 30, 40 employees, they've all come in at different dates, different strike prices, which means I suppose the valuation would have been done. We can touch on 409A valuation, but there'll be a strike price assigned to each individual option holder. They'll have different vesting schedules. So the typical one, again, this is something that you should chat to Lisa about. Typical one that we put in place that we see is a 1-year cliff with a 4-year vest. So we can track all of that for you, but that becomes super complicated over time. What we would do is upload all of that detail into the platform so you can manage it. So we'll create live statuses. We'll have all the legal details. You can do things like open and close exercise windows. So back to our point of employees exercising options at some stage in the future, we'll allow for that to be opened in the background so that they can do it at a time that makes sense. We don't just want employees exercising options when it doesn't make sense. So we'll kind of dictate your comms to the employees so they know when to exercise options. We'll upload all of the legal documents that you've generated that will govern the plans, and then we'll digitize the whole experience from the employee side of things. That's a massive part of what we see the value here, is the employees receiving stock options. If you rewind, or if you kind of step back and think about the whole ecosystem, for employees to receive stock options and hopefully go through an exit, it's something that can create this flywheel effect where they maybe go and start their own companies, they start to angel invest, maybe they start their own funds. It all gets recycled back into the ecosystem. It's a very healthy part of the flywheel ultimately. But we can digitize that whole experience for those employees through stakeholder management. This is where you'll manage all your employees, but we'll see, and any stakeholder for that matter, but you can see what they see. So I can click here to view dashboard. And this is the digital experience that those individual employees will see. Investors will have something similar, but I suppose just to give you an idea of what the employees will be able to see. So they'll be able to digitally accept and sign their stock options. They'll be able to exercise through the platform. And then they'll get a kind of overarching breakdown of what shares they own. Maybe they still have some options outstanding. They'll see all the breakdown of the vesting schedules. And then really importantly, they can model out to see, okay, I joined the company 3 years ago. I've gone through 2 years of vesting. Maybe there's a potential exit on the horizon based on some communications internally, and the share price of the company is going to jump to $100. Just models out and gives them a really clear view of what the potential upside is. But it also educates them around the idea that these are stock options. They're going to have to part with some cash to be able to actually exercise and own the options, but it's going to be at a significant discount to what the current share price is versus the original strike price, which is the piece that we mentioned that is important to track. That's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully it gives you a nice idea of kind of what it looks like to join some dots with some of the terms that we would have gone through today. Any other questions?
I do have a couple of follow-ups, if I may. So, and thank you for the screen share. This is really helpful. So you mentioned about uploading documents and material about kind of the the cap table, like if I'm coming in and I've had a round and it hasn't been digitized, or it's been digitized in an Excel form or something, are you
Yeah.
going to help me put it all in here? How does that process work? If I'm coming in through My Next Raise and I'm, joining this, like, I understand that it's included in the subscription for My Next Raise, but is there an additional fee for that kind of hands-on assistance?
So our team offers a complimentary onboarding. It's very hands-on, so we'll basically do all of the heavy lifting for you. We have a dedicated team of certified equity professionals that work on the onboarding team. So they'll ask you for 2 documents at the early doors. So they'll ask you for your cap table and spreadsheet form and your articles of incorporation. And then they'll start to parse through all of that information. They'll do a full reconciliation and analysis, and then they'll ultimately create a digital account and cap table for you. So we'll do all that initial heavy lifting to get you onboarded, but the expectation post that is, and it is designed to be a SaaS kind of self-service business model. So the idea post us onboarding is that you would manage it yourself. Now you'll still have contact details for our team if you do have any challenges or there's any specific questions. Obviously Lisa and team will be by your side as well from the My Next Raise side of things. So you will have contacts, but it's designed, I suppose, to be self-service. So we tried to set that expectation, but we're definitely there to help out as you get used to the platform. But I suppose the way we've designed it, hopefully you can see it from the demo, is that it's designed to be simple, easy to navigate. We have a bunch of user guides that we would build in as well to help you get through. But we'll do all the initial heavy lifting for you.
Yeah.
And my
And
employees
just
would
to-
then have access to a dashboard that they would be able to see through that as well?
Exactly.
Okay, and they wouldn't
Exactly.
have to log in through My Next Raise to get there. They'd be able to kind of come in on the back end?
Exactly.
Correct.
Cool.
Correct. It's completely hosted in a completely separate environment with JP Morgan Workplace Solutions. You can access it and find it through My Next Raise, but you'll have a completely separate way to share it and to access it. And just to note too that, as startup lawyers, this is what we do all the time as well. As Alan has mentioned, we work with our clients on a regular basis to help them get their cap table management set, their equity incentive plan in place. We have management capabilities to do it for you as well, to help you. So it seems very complicated, and in some instances it can be, but between what JP Morgan, what this is offering, what Alan's and Vanessa's team can do, as well as working with the next team, it really becomes much more simplified and streamlined.
And Patty, you asked the typical follow-up question is, who the heck is going to do all this? So I just want to go ahead and stress again what Alan mentioned is, along with our partnership with My Next Raise, is we understand whether you're on a platform or using Excel, this can take time. So one of the things that and it's on the priority list of everything else that you have going on with running a business is, when should I get to it? We have seen an increase, especially during year end, is to say, allow us to help you get organized. To Alan's point, it comes absolutely complimentary. All you have to do, and kind of next steps, is we ask that if you are interested in just having more of a private conversation or even interested in the platform, again, it is complimentary. Up to 100 stakeholders. But most importantly, the hard piece of the onboarding is also complimentary. So the first time around, we go have a quick one-on-one demo to make sure that we understand the needs of your cap table. And then thereafter, our team will go ahead and send you a link for terms and conditions. You upload your articles of incorporation along with your cap table documents, whether that's in Excel or whether you're on another platform. You just have to download and literally just copy and paste documents, and our team will build it out for you. From there, we'll set up a second call just to show you, hey, here are the documents that you presented to us. Here's your digital cap table. From there, we want to make sure that you understand kind of all the buttons and where everything is. If you have questions, there's always a support email for us to get back to you in, typically around 24 to 48 hours. And so making it super simple, no time at all, really, just from like the copy and paste documents. And then the second meeting, when we connect you to our onboarding team to say, does this look like the representation of your documents? So thank you for that question. Happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, any questions? We have a few minutes left, or actually it's a good amount of time left. if anybody wants to dig into these or any other questions. And Vanessa or Alan, feel free to sort of spend a minute telling about other solutions that you guys have. I know you do a lot of other things as well. So we can spend a few minutes talking about that, but want to make sure that nobody has any additional questions.
Yeah, absolutely happy to take the lead on that. But again, I know that the information that we provided today could be heavy. So just for a round of virtual awareness here, please give us a thumbs up if you found today's conversation helpful. Awesome. Awesome. And for those off camera, awesome. Thank you so much, Faraz and Shireen. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Thanks, Elizabeth. And again, our mission, and please tell a friend to tell a friend, our mission is to have these type of quarterly conversations. Feel free to spread the word. To Lisa's point, the other thing that we offer to early stage founder is complementary banking solutions. So think about the day in, day out, banking accounts that you may need. Traditionally, there is a charge and a deposit requirement to help avoid the fee. Also, one of the things that we've stressed as a bank is we realize that early stage founders need some sort of credit. Now, credit is really hard if you're pre-revenue. So one of the things that we've done here at the bank is help provide a credit card that isn't PG, personal guarantees. So again, if you have any questions with reference to our banking, happy to connect you to our partners. Lisa did go ahead and put the link in there twice. Don't want to keep asking if there's no other questions, but if there isn't, no problem. But if there is, we'll take one more round. Yeah.
Go ahead, Praniti.
Hi, it's a bit more of a specific question for life sciences. Are you able to speak about some of the typical percentages allocated that you see? I know like for a stock option pool, it's about 10 to 15% per round. But like founder equity, and I know it can change with every round, obviously, but is there a general ballparks that people try to maintain?
Yeah. I'll tell you so none of this is legal advice, but I will share a common conversation or topic. So
Yes.
Traditionally, when we've spoken to our VC partners or friends, traditionally they don't like to see more than 20%, and 20 is on the top end, before a price round, meaning a Series A. The other confusing part around the early stages, well, what is a Series A, and at what dollar does it become a Series A? So definitely a conversation you want to continue to have with your counsel. But the rule of thumb is typically no more than 20% before you have a priced round. That way, one of the things that I want to highlight again that is very popular in the early stages, but have an eye out for your safes. Your safes are traditionally the first way that you are fundraising after your friends and family, but they can start to add up. And so one of the features that you're able to use complementary on our platform is that round modeling scenario to see, hey, when these all convert, how much have I given up? And that will also help with your conversations with counsel with reference to negotiation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry,
Great
it wasn't
question.
a definite
Really
answer.
great.
No,
it's a
I mean,
great
it's
question.
a tricky one anyway, but just to get a sense, because I know like 10 to 15 for stock option pool, I've heard that quite a bit. So I was just curious about. So
Yeah,
that's
pretty
perfect. Thank you,
standard.
Vanessa.
And that's
Yeah.
also the 10 to 15 is also part of the 20% dilution. So again, just conversations that you want to think about.
Oh, okay. So 20% total. So 20% dilution, not more than 20% dilution, ideally by first price round.
I'm going to have Alan come on this, but remember, the pool is not diluted yet.
Oh, it's allocated.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it'll vary, especially if you're in life sciences, because naturally the rounds are typically bigger in life sciences, so it's going to be a slightly different model. I think I would always bring it back to like first principles. How much do you need to raise in the first place? So like if you're a life sciences business, if you're trying to have 18, 24 months runway, that's typically what you will use to say, okay, I need to raise 10 million to get me 10 months or 18 months of runway. And it's a bit different for a life sciences business. If you're doing trials, you maybe have more upfront capital costs. It's more capitally intensive early doors versus maybe a B2B SaaS company that can build for less capital. So I think that's probably the first consideration. It very much varies. Like we see all sorts. I think like Vanessa mentioned, like seed rounds probably can be anywhere between 10 and 20% dilution. Hopefully it starts to decrease as you go past your probably first big institutional round at Series A. I think the biggest thing for you to think about is own as much of the business as you can. Like I think that's probably the aim. You really want to hold on to as much of the business as you can, and that again relates back to how much do you need to raise. Like if you don't need to raise 100 million, you can run the business for 18 months with 50 million, and you own more of the business. That's a better scenario for you to be in. Post Series A, so if you own 60% post Series A, you're probably in a good position. Ideally, you want to own a little bit more, but that's typically what investors would want to see from your own motivation to stay on, to keep building the business. They want to see it get to a stage of maturity where it can be sold. That's their exit ultimately. So that's probably what to expect. And then the option pool is typically allocated post the investment round, so it will somewhat dilute the stakeholders. Again, I think Lisa and team will be well placed to be able to advise you on how that's structured. Ultimately, I suppose the stock option pools don't exist. They're option pools. They're these pools. They're a set of shares that are allocated to issue out. So those options in theory don't exist until they're exercised. But yeah, I would defer to Lisa and team to give you more advice on how to structure them and set them up and the impact.
Thank you.
Yeah, Praniti, we work with life sciences companies all the time, so feel free to ping me if you want to have a deeper conversation.
Okay, great.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
the question and for being here.
Thank
Any
you.
final questions for Vanessa or Alan?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. And sorry, joining late. Hi, Lisa, everybody. Thank you for the great presentation. I was wondering for that offer of your bank accounts, do we have to, are those through Chase or any other financial institutes JP Morgan is part of, or then also how does it work? So, I mean, I'm planning to open a new business bank account in California. I've got a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, so I was just wondering if that's something that can work for you to maybe make a phone call or make us part of this group, or
Yeah, and just really quick, where in California are you based?
San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay. Maybe for this one, Lisa, if you like, happy to provide Alan's email since he's based out west. And then Alan, you can connect and see who the right banker would be in the SF market.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And thank you for choosing us. We appreciate it. The startup world in general is not new to JP Morgan. However, as of 2 years ago, we've really made an effort to be extremely intentional on the early stage, especially pre-seed. We want to make sure that you think of us of all of the tools. Let's be honest, maybe rumors were different, but we are really out here to say we want to provide the tools necessary. The truth is your wins are our wins, and we hope that you think of us as you continue to scale. So thank you for that, Faraz. And then Alan, you can provide your email on the chat. That way you all can connect.
Yeah, and actually on the email that I'm going to circulate with today's recording, I have Vanessa and Alan copied, so you'll be able to access their emails there as well.
Okay, wonderful. And in terms of the login to the panel with the link provided, you have to do a new registration for JP Morgan, or next is going to be transferring over our information?
Nope. So another great question. We value your privacy. So therefore, the link that Lisa provided on the chat, if you are interested in learning more, please head on over to the link. It is going to ask you to submit your information. We are not able to share any of your documentation, hence the reason why it has to go through the link.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Awesome. I hope you all found this conversation extremely helpful. I know that it can be very dry, but it's always a good sign when folks stay past the 10-minute mark. So thank you all so much. And Lisa, back over to you. Thank you for having us.
It may be dry, Vanessa, but it's critical. So, you know, it's not an area to ignore or shy away from, because if you do, do it at your peril. So huge thank you to Vanessa and Alan and the whole JP Morgan Workplace Solutions team. My Next Raise and Next are so honored to partner with them and be able to have them provide this critical information. So again, stay tuned for an email from me with today's recording, copying Vanessa and Alan. And guys, if you'd like today's presentation, I don't know if that's something Vanessa and Alan you're comfortable sharing, feel free to reach out to them and request for today's presentation. Please sign up for my next raise. We're in our beta mode. Things are going exciting, very, very well. The code is beta 2024. There are lots of incredible tools in there, tons of webinars and events and pitch prep sessions and investor office hours, and lots more to be added in 2025. So thank you all for joining today. And if we don't see you again, have a happy and healthy and safe holiday season. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.